All right, we are live. I have hijacked Channing's account. Just kidding. Um, we are live with Channing Ferrer and Alex Sukennik. Did I pronounce that right, Alex? I want to make sure I got
It,
that right.
it's Sukennik. Yep, close.
Sukennik. Perfect.
Yep.
And we are talking about AI and risk and all things governance today. It's going to be really a fun conversation. Thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting and letting me hijack your account. Um, so Channing, I kind of wanted to kick off because this came out of something that you actually said to me that I was like, well, yo, that's interesting. And that is that the role of the Chief Information Officer is changing. So why don't you give us a little bit of background of why this topic has been on your mind?
Yeah, definitely. So I know we were kind of going back and forth chatting a little bit about what is AI impacting, which is everything these days. And as I started thinking more about the CIO role, and working with Alex and a bunch of other great CIOs in the past, I began to realize, man, it's got to be really tricky from a CIO lens, because part of the CIO job, of course, is to find the best technology solutions out there for a company. But part of it also is a bit of risk management, a bit of kind of looking at things with a conservative lens, I think, at times. And in the world of AI, that's not the way we think as much anymore. We have to be a little more aggressive. We have to move a little faster, and so on. And companies that aren't moving quickly are the ones that tend to get left behind. So I was kind of really curious to hear from someone's perspective who's a CIO who knows this world very well, and thus I reached out to Alex.
Alex, I'd love if you don't mind taking a few minutes to just introduce yourself and talk about a little bit of who you are and what you do.
That'd be great. So first of all, thank you, Channing, for thinking of me to be your partner here in discussing the modern CIO element. Thank you for hosting me, of course. I'm Alex Sukennik. I've been with Semrush for the past 4.5 years. I came into the company as a CIO, and came to join Semrush right when the company went IPO. And so the company was going through a big transition to becoming a public company, and a lot of rigor and a lot of systems, a lot of processes needed to be put in place. And that's kind of how the last couple of years have gone on. We've done a lot of growth. The company's done tremendously well from a perspective of uh, adjusting to market expectations as AI started to hit. Our customers were expecting to see how they're seen in the AI world, and the company pivoted very quickly to create a product, and that, of course, needed some elements of AI internally. I'm happy to talk about that as we progress in our talk. But been with Semrush for 4.5 years. It's been fantastic until the recent acquisition with Adobe. It's also been fantastic, but we've been a public company until the acquisition of Adobe, and Adobe has now purchased us. I believe it was a couple of months ago, and so I'm actually sitting in the Adobe headquarters today. It's wonderful to be part of a big team. We just launched a massive platform of brand visibility for that combines an Adobe product as well as a Semrush product, which is really, really cool to see. And speaking of AI, because of AI, we were able to launch that in several months instead of years, what it would normally take to launch. So happy to talk about that as well. So, but AI has definitely done a lot for me as a CIO, and it's been a great experience for the past 4.5 years.
Amazing.
Nice.
And Channing, do you
And
want
by
to
the way,
talk a little bit
Alex,
about how you guys know each other?
yeah, definitely, definitely. And I was going to say congrats again on that journey. I know we worked together at
Yeah,
Semrush for a little while, and you've had a huge impact there. And I think seeing that acquisition happen, I know it's exciting to see Semrush and the team take that next step and being part of Adobe. In terms of backstory, just quickly for everyone. So as I mentioned, we worked together at Semrush, where I was the chief sales officer for a bit, working alongside Alex. And we've just quick kind of fun anecdote. We stay in touch. He and I, we live both in the Boston area, and we ran into each other on vacation not that long ago. So we were just both off in Greece and literally ran into each other in the same island on Greece as we were texting. So it was kind of fun to catch up.
And they did
definitely.
not plan. the matching shirts, by the way, that happened naturally.
No, it's a
So
small world. Yeah, small world and small tastes. Yes.
So I wanted to kick this off and just sort of open it up, and maybe Alex, you're the right sort of person to start this. How do you think AI has fundamentally changed what it means to be a CIO?
It's a great question. Look, I think CIOs, if you look at kind of IT, it's been the remit of the engine room, and then the whole infrastructure as service and AWS came in, and all of a sudden IT came to the table to be an enabler of business and how do you scale. And certainly this last revolution of AI is something that I've never seen. It took a long time to adopt infrastructure as service, and then there was software as a service, and now there's the AI element. And this is the fastest adoption that I've ever experienced in my career. And I think the function of CIO has changed because a lot of people, the executive team that sits in a room, they'll look for the CIO to give some element of direction of how do we get our employees to be productive in a more efficient way. What are the things that we need to do? Some mistakes that I would say are made is let's just get AI into everybody's hands without necessarily talking about what do we want for business outcomes. I think that's the biggest thing. CIOs are now looking at platforms that they bring into organizations. They're less evaluating is it 3 nines, 4 nines of availability. They're evaluating what is that product's roadmap from an AI perspective, and how is it going to make the job of my employees better, faster, potentially cheaper, or pick two. So I think CIOs are really looking at the evaluation cycle of seeing the company's product roadmap now of what AI can do, understanding if bringing in agents or agentic elements of that platform is something that's not repetitive, something that you might have not already, or something you might have already built in the company, and it could potentially harm you by bringing in some of these tools because you already developed them, or vice versa. You could eliminate some of the tools you manually developed to bring in more efficiency in operations. So I think the CIO lens and remit nowadays, certainly working with the former co-founder Oleg and our CEO Bill Wagner, we looked at how do we take the tools that we have in the organization, go back to those vendors and understand what's going to be their roadmap, and how do we plan to bring these things to every employee so that employees can be much more efficient. And the biggest component of that that CIO has to get is how do you capture the efficiency? We've seen a lot of companies say we're going to cut X number of staff. What we focused on at Semrush was how do we make our employees more efficient? So we stop incrementally hiring in certain functions because now people are working faster and they're working better. So those are the lens. Now the conversation is really around people, processes, optimization, productivity, collaboration, and evaluating those platforms versus looking at your 3 nines, 4 nines, and your renewal rates.
Yeah, Alex, you raised so many interesting points in what you just said there. I'm kind of curious on two of them. One of them is around this idea of incrementality and productivity, and I can see that coming out of Oleg, incrementality right away. But on the incremental benefit that products can bring to employees. But how do you go about deciding on should we build this or buy this? Because I think in today with AI, there's a lot of talk of, we've got lots of different products that now you can use to build things on your own. And do we need to go buy new tools, or should we just decide to build on our own? So just hearing what you said, again, a lot of interesting things, but that was one that jumped into my mind is, do we build versus buy? Has that changed in how you make that sort of build buy decision now?
Yeah, 100%. Look, I think it all begins with your team, right? You could have a huge engineering team of AI engineers, but there's just not a big pool out there, or there wasn't a year ago, even if you looked at it. So nowadays, what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand, everybody has very similar or the same LLM exposures. When you go look at an LLM, you're all looking at the Claudes, you're all looking at Geminis, we're all looking at kind of the very similar models. The question is, what are you doing with those models, and what does your success look like internally? If you have a team of 5 people, there's only so much of that ocean you can boil, right? And then you start to look at the vendors, and you're starting to see, well, the vendors, they have teams of these folks potentially that they've hired, and they're certainly able to move at a faster clip. And if that faster clip delivers you the efficiency that you need, then your team of 3 to 4 or 5 engineers that you might have in your IT organization is much better off focusing on data to support bringing a tool like that in. So they kind of, I'm kind of answering you with it depends.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you have a team that is not a massive team, like we don't have a big team at Semrush, but we were able to bring that talented team to say, we have these different platforms and they have certain buckets that make a ton of efficiency for us. How do we incorporate that into clean data using MCP, using all of those components to be able to drive, conversational Gen AI elements into with bots that we would then offer to our employees? So the answer is, if you got a vendor that's really good at this and they have a team that's dedicated and there's a really good roadmap, you're much better off focusing on your processes and data to make sure that you can use that efficiency. If they don't have that, then you're probably building some elements that are fundamentally, IP to your company. In those cases, you got to go build, because that just makes a ton more sense, because they're IP'd with your data, with your knowledge, and that makes that much more successful. And then you MCP that vendor through your own platform to be able to get to your data. So
Yeah.
that would be the way I look at it.
Yeah. And Blair, sorry, I'm gonna keep going on this if that's all right.
You go.
I love the focus on data. It does because data is so critical for AI. Like, you have to have good data to drive good decisions and all. And first of all, I guess one of the things that you just said is the thing I've been saying also when I look at Brevo through the lens of, do you want to buy a Brevo type solution for one of our customers maybe, or do you want to build something yourself? I think the question is sometimes, do you want to be a marketing engagement platform solution provider yourself, or do you want to be a insurance redistribution company that buys best of breed software? And I think that decision is probably for most companies still pretty clear. Be what I am and buying best of breed solutions. But to do that effectively, back to your point on data, you have to have a really good data infrastructure, because data allows you to do so many more things in so many different capacities now. And how do you manage that data? Does the data team kind of roll up to you, or how do you manage that? Or is it its own central function even now?
Yeah, it kind of depends on each company's environment. So for us at Semrush, there's the product data that the product team manages, and they have product engineers, as well as they have product components of AI specialists that work with that data, right? We're a data platform for the most part. And then there's internally what we have, which is the analytics team that reports to our CFO, where Brian's organization, Brian Muller is our CFO. Brian's organization works very closely with the data team to drive analytics for the organization. And then the IT organization, we make sure that there's connectors into our business systems so that data is properly moved over. There's data governance, data definitions that we mutually assign and agree to. And so if you don't have that centralization that provides data access, that gives you data stewardship, that gives you data governance, your answers from an AI platform is going to be as good as that data structure potentially is for a company.
Yeah.
And so that's why we at Semrush the last 18 months have invested a good amount of time to making sure that we have the ability to speak to our data. So when you're looking at forecast numbers of those components and you have a bunch of reports in Tableau or whatever your platform is, Power BI, instead of going and looking at a report that data on the background is providing you, there's much more innovation now. And at Semrush, we've certainly have double clicked on that innovation to be able to speak with data. If you're looking at something and you're curious, well, how does it compare to this other product? You can actually ask it a question and it starts to provide you. And that's that whole ecosystem that I talked about earlier on, which is, you have data, you have definitions around it. Now you can bring in your AI component, put an engineer on it, and now you have a wrapper with governance models that allows you to actually speak to it and be able to get business outcomes that you're trying to get out of data.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Just before we continue, I do want to say to the audience that you can ask questions in the comments, and we're going to answer them as they come in. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them, and we're going to answer them. And Channing, I think this is really interesting because you're seeing it from the vendor side, and your interactions with various CIOs. Has that changed at all for you, or not?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I look at it almost through two lenses because, of course, we have it through the lens of being a marketing automation provider, and we sell into marketing organizations and we sell technology, similar in many ways to Semrush, non-competitive, but similar in many senses. But then also, of course, we have to manage our own AI strategy and build our own AI culture and do a lot of the things that Alex is talking about. So we're kind of we're trying to live a little bit of what we position to our customer base as well. And one of the things that's been really important for us around kind of building what I might even call an AI culture internally is top down. First of all, is just leaning into using AI day to day and every little use case that we can come up with. So not being restrictive in any sense. Over time, we might want to get restrictive. We might want to limit tokens. We might want to manage more closely, I guess, how much we're spending on LLMs. But for the first part of this year, we've been very open on it and encouraging. And we look at it as everyone should be using AI in every part of their day to day, and that gets into how a developer builds product. That goes into how a salesperson writes an email, and so on. And it's allowed us to really refine that in a very quick way. And one of the things that it's led down the path of, and Alex, I'm curious on this one as well, because as I said, you made a lot of interesting comments in your first statement there, is the speed to launch product. So one of the things that we've been able to do at Brevo is we've actually built up a tool that allows our engineers to launch product much faster. And it's our feature factory, we call it. So it's custom built, and we've built it on Claude. And what we can do now is all of our engineers and product managers are builders. We actually don't have different roles in-house anymore. We have one role, and that's a builder. And even our designers, they're all builders. So we have small pods, and those pods work on various topics, and they'll go into the feature factory and they can scope out something. I can even go in there and build a prototype. Like today, I could go build a prototype very quickly. I have that prototype. I can go from prototype then into actual code, and the feature factory allows me to push it over into code. It builds the code for me. It'll go through a QA process, and then we can ultimately push into production. So we can move really quickly on building things. And this was part of the engineering team's idea early on in terms of leveraging AI to kind of use AI in a different way so we can move much faster. And it's not just using kind of the standard Claude capabilities, but again, we build something custom to allow us to go a lot faster. And it's been really interesting to see how that's evolved so quickly for us. And Alex, it sounds like you guys may have done something similar in the sense where you can launch product significantly faster as well.
Yeah, we definitely have. We've, like I just mentioned with Adobe, two teams that are very much motivated with the right people, having an offsite, and basically in 6 weeks being able to understand which parts of the product need to be integrated, and using AI certainly to drive the experience component, right, to make it look like it's a all unified tool, which it is. Certainly, both sides have AI deployment built out. The engineering team for us at Semrush has been able to really print features. It really is amazing how they do it, and it's all within within an architecture that was set up by our engineering development team. So you guys talk about developers. We have a team that really focuses on delivering tools to the engineers, so they can do very similar things to what you're talking about. They can go and they can talk to whether it's a library or whether it's specific code base or whether it's specific LLM model, and be able to assign tasks, and then having an AI element to look at those tasks and start driving code based on those tasks that were assigned. So imagine a world if you're developing a product and you can create tasks, you can create epics, you can create the stories that you need, and as they're broken down, you have your LLM models looking at those components, and now they're generating code for you, millions lines of code that then gets accepted. One of the things that we track within IT when we build our own products for internally is how many lines of code was written by AI and how many of those were successful. And if, from the last numbers that I saw, it was like a 98.3% acceptance rate of code that would have been written by people right back in the day, and now it is written by our own models within the IT organization. And the product team, uses very similar type of tactics to drive and adopt AI so they can bring products to market faster with potentially even fewer people. So it's been it's been an amazing thing to see how quickly you can turn it on. And as you know, Channing, at Semrush, we have, I'm sure like with you guys, very talented engineers that know the market and product very well and have been able to adapt the technology, not only to build our own tools, but also to have AI within our own product, so that we can offer AI solutions to our customer base.
Yeah, nice.
Couple comments from the audience. One, pointing out excellent point Alex made about adoption timelines. And the same user is saying not just centralization, but a culture of maintaining data hygiene across or an entire business that is on leadership fostering that culture where AI is a collaborative partner and not a danger in the ecosystem. Matthew is asking, and I think this question could be interesting for both of you, is how are you using AI on a day-to-day level? I mean, you both kind of went into it just like a little bit in terms of like your teams and stuff, but like individually, how are you actually using AI on a day-to-day level?
Yeah, so I'll quickly comment. I think the way I leverage AI is very simple, and I was working on a skill even today on this. I kind of wish I were a more sophisticated user, but I'm getting myself there. I think the simplest thing for me is going to be in understanding and analytics, number one. So if I need to do if I want to do a RevOps request of some sort, I want to understand what's going on in the German region over the past 3 to 6 months. Why is retention dropping? Why is growth accelerating? Whatever it might be. I'll ask AI to help me with that analysis, and I can get a much quicker response than going through my RevOps team and having them, carve out some time to do an analysis and come back to me a day later. I can get that response very quickly. So I've got Claude hooked into our analytics, internal analytics. We use this Omni Studio analytics tool, and it'll help analyze that through Omni. It'll also plug into Slack for me and see what trends are happening and what commentary is happening in Slack around that same topic. So I kind of come back with data-driven analysis with also some softer elements to it. I think again, Slack, and we leverage Notion too. So I'll ask it to look at Notion as well. So that's very helpful. And that sort of like insights, analytics, or other insights I find extremely valuable for me. And I use that pretty often to really understand the business. I can also leverage AI. And again, I tend to lean on Claude a lot, although Omni has a pretty strong AI tool that I go into as well. But I tend to lean on Claude for just integrations with Brevo. So we have a Brevo MCP server hookup that I'll leverage to understand what's going on in our pipeline, what's going on with deal flow, how are customer relationships evolving possibly. So again, I can do that very simply with Claude. And then I think the third one is really how we think about marketing. And I'll work very closely with the marketing team on a variety of AI initiatives, I would call them, and it goes well beyond, of course, just basic content creation. But how do we leverage AI to drive the right target audience? How do we leverage AI to help build up new campaigns, to run those campaigns in a much more automated way, which, for example, it could be just building the sequences for us as opposed to a human building those sequences and building the content, and we'll have AI to kind of do that for us. So that's, I'd say, less hands-on for me, but a lot more of just understanding what we can do through the team and then talking through it and making some decisions. So I'd say those are probably the three elements where I see myself most regularly in AI.
It's
Alex,
pretty
what about for
impressive,
you?
Channing. That's pretty impressive, Channing. You're running a pretty tight shop. But I use there's a couple of different ways that I probably answer the question. I use AI to do a lot of research, and I would say that's probably on the personal side. If I'm curious on a topic, if I want to get an understanding of what's going on for a particular, um, you know, what's the best car to buy, or so on and so forth. So I use a lot of AI from a daily basis. My daughter plays volleyball. I want to understand what are the best clinics for where I am at this time, right? So there's my behavior has switched from Googling to really going to AI is that first question. That's really been something that I've noticed as my go-to is let's go look at LLM to answer the question for me. I think from a work perspective, I can't live without AI from a work perspective nowadays. Even as we were, having conversations around this meeting, my engagement was basically almost role playing with an AI and an LLM component. That helps me kind of get grounded in terms of getting my thoughts together. The other component of my AI journey is what's our roadmap look like at Semrush? How are we enabling? So we've actually put together some scorecards that calculate what our agents are doing, how many times they're running, are they being successful? Have we enabled the organization? What are the projects that are coming in that, and we have a big AI community at Semrush. And what are some of the ideas and projects that are coming in that are AI based? And then having some element of a discussion, okay, this AI project, what's the ROI on that? So we've kind of built our own models internally to understand what are the productivity gains, what are the productivity efficiencies that we can gain. And we're using AI to basically define which program. If Channing has 5 things that he wants us to go do, we're using AI to basically come back to Channing and say, the biggest bang for your buck is this one. It's going to deliver $800,000 of productivity and cost avoidance, whereas these other ones are about 3,000 to 5,000. So we're using AI to analyze those components to understand what's the priority that we need to go work on, in terms of getting our engineers the right roadmap or the business outcomes that we're looking to create. So it's used on a personal way. That's a very different behavior. And even to look at what the rest of my 2026 and 2027 roadmap for delivery, we certainly leverage AI to understand what the business is looking from us, and so on and so forth. And I've already talked about speaking with data. If I want some analytics, I speak with data. I speak with data more than before. When I needed something, we'd get the analytics team together. It'd be 5 or 6 of us. Now I go to this data platform and I can have a conversation and I get all the answers that I need.
Yeah. Alex, I'm gonna share one little cheat code that someone shared with me last week that I really like. Is I created a skill, and this came from someone else, so I don't want to take credit on it, but I created a skill to monitor what my CEO is talking about on Slack every week, and then give me an update that morning before my weekly one-on-one, so I know it's top of mind for him. So
Very nice.
A nice little cheat code going into one-on-ones with execs.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Did you do that on Claude?
Yeah.
Nice. Very nice.
It's actually pretty useful, I'm finding.
Very cool.
Interestingly, I have also kind of done that where I have my agent go into all of my call recordings for the day and say, like, okay, who am I meeting with? What's their LinkedIn? What do I need to know about them? And then I have it at the end of the day go in and say, out of all the conversations I had today, what were some of the most important things that came out of those conversations? Were there any through lines that came out of those that I should be aware of? So if you want to add to that, Channing. Question from Corey, and I imagine that this is for Alex, but I'd like to hear from both of you. How are you handling prioritization at an enterprise level, specifically speaking of the volume of internal requests increasing with the capacity that AI has enabled for internal applications and tools?
I can provide some color in that. So I'd give you, so Corey, thank you for the question. It's a question that a lot of organizations are having, and it's a question that I speak with a lot of my peers on. So I think about a program in a company in 3 buckets: enablement and adoption, right? So how much adoption do we have in a company? So we made it a corporate policy that anybody that comes into the organization must have AI training. So as they onboard, we created some content for people to do AI training. So there's no longer employees that are coming into Semrush that have not done some element of AI training, understand what prompting is, and so on and so forth. And that's becoming in 10 years, it'll be second nature. But for now, we created a program of enablement and so on and so forth. And then the second bucket is empowerment. Channing talked about that a little bit, is allowing your employees to basically go use the tools. But it's a little bit more than that. We created a Slack channel where folks can go in and they can submit what they would like to do from an AI perspective. They probably need some IT help if they've come to us, but they want some help because we probably have the data, we have the business systems. They want to be able to create some kind of efficiency. And we talk to the organization around what's the outcome. We don't talk about a project. We want an outcome. So if you're, for example, call recording, can you build me call recording notes? We probably won't take that project until we actually ask the question, what are we trying to have as an outcome? Are we trying to create it so that salespeople at the end of the call don't need to take 30 minutes worth of notes across 350 salespeople, right? So that generates a number of productivity and efficiency. And based on that, we're running AI kind of analytics of what that costs per hour, what that looks like for full-time employees. So as we look at these projects, we separate them based on the group that's asking. So we have go-to-market activities, we have our engineering activities, We have G&A activities, maybe finance, and so on and so forth. And as these get submitted, they get a dollar value associated with them. And these empowerment components, basically, then we look at and sit down with either the requesters or that team's leader and say, we have 15 requests, we can handle 5, 4, 3, whatever the number is. And these have the biggest weight. These have the biggest outcome that we think for the company that can generate. And we can do them for you or with you. So then we have a roadmap of the things that our engineering team can go and handle. And then the last one is the scalability. That's the one that's transformative in nature. That's the big one where you come in and you say, anytime I have a closed won opportunity, this is what I wanted to go for to customer success. This is what I want it to look like. I want to send out enablement to the customer. I want to send how-to videos, a lot of automation, a lot of workflow components that are more complicated based on data, based on context, maybe involving product, and so on and so forth. So that third bucket on scale is the transformative things that we need to go do in the organization for us at Semrush. And that's how we run our roadmap. And it provides some really good observations. We've also, when Bill was here, created an MBO/OKR. Different companies call it differently, but a C-level is responsible for implementing AI in their respective function and show value that has generated productivity. So we implemented that quite a while ago. And so when these requests get submitted, they're welcomed by the executive team because we all have we're all focused on delivering those outcomes to the company. So hopefully that's a very long answer to, we have a program and we have a scorecard where we can monitor and watch all of these things, and the methodology for which things we prioritize and work on.
Yeah. Alex, I'm curious on, I know there's another question in there, but before we go there, I'm curious on, as you were talking, one thing that I think is tricky to decide these days, but going back to what I was saying before and building on that a little, is how do you, if you decide this is you need a new solution for a problem, and you look at that solution, you say, we're better off to go external to a vendor maybe than build internally. That's a decision maybe you make. How do you go about sorting through vendors that exist out there now? And the reason I raise this is because there's so many companies. I feel like there's more than there were before. They're talking about their AI roadmaps. Everyone's got an AI roadmap. Everyone is AI this, AI that. The message is so blended together. I feel like when you identified a problem, you want to look at vendors. All the vendors sound similar. How do you go about figuring out how to navigate through that messiness of finding a third-party solution for something?
Yeah, I go to my AI tool. No, I think there's a couple of components. Number one, you want to look at your incumbents, because eliminating any kind of a tool is a very expensive and a difficult component, right? What is their roadmap? What does that look like? But I think that's the obvious answer, is you kind of start within. And then as you start to kind of evaluate what's happening, I think it all comes back to data, right? So if you're speaking with a vendor and the vendor is saying, I have this workflow, I have this automation, and internally, but my data is garbage. I'm going to put lipstick on a pig here. I'm going to give you garbage in, garbage out. And so we look at vendors that can help us sort through that. We look at vendors that can say, we've seen 100 companies like you that have data here, have data there, have data everywhere. And here's how they've done it, right? They've created a data lake, or dating some technology, but they've created an MCP to be able to go here. Here's how we serve it up. Then we do X, Y, and Z. We can build an agent to validate that against another data source. So they're not just giving you a solution if they've built an AI workflow. They're actually explaining to you under the hood how that workflow is tested, validated, and corrected. And then is there human in the loop component? Because if you're an experienced executive, you can see where there's smoke, right? You can kind of see that's not going to work, and we're going to spend months trying to implement this thing, and at the end of the day, the answer is going to be, I got to go rebuild my data. What I don't want to do is rebuild my data. I know it sucks, and what I want is a solution that's going to go and take my data and create a validation component. And I know I need a human in the loop. Does your system learn?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're talking, right? So it's asking the right questions of the vendor and not just going for, my car goes 120 miles an hour. Yeah, but the speed limit is 35. I don't care about 120 miles an hour. I got to understand how I'm going to get there at 35 miles an hour in the most comfort and the best effective way possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I actually think as you were talking, you were probably addressing the other question that Corey raised around data. But it's interesting because we're selling to slightly different companies. We're selling at Brevo, we're selling more to B2C businesses, and Semrush being more of a B2B business. But the problems are fundamentally the same. And it does start with data. And what we're seeing in the market is companies are, first of all, saying, I need to, of course, recognize that I need to have good, clean data to do whatever I want to do. But the path to getting to good, clean data is much more diverse, I would say, than it used to be. And I think, to your point, you can use tooling to help get you there. That tooling could be within one product. It could actually sit across multiple products now, because I think
Yep.
integrations are much, much stronger than they used to be, and there's a lot more flexibility around that. And that's something that we're seeing. For example, like we have a CDP component built into Brevo. Sometimes people want to use that, but sometimes people want to use their own third-party CDP, and they just want to have an API connection that's like a high volume API connection into Brevo, and that works just as well in many cases. But it ultimately starts with the foundation of data, and then once that data, you have confidence in your ability to use that data properly, then the output becomes clearer. But it's interesting just hearing it from your lens. It's very similar to what we see in the B2C world. I think it's just probably slightly higher volumes, but Semrush has a lot of customers, so I imagine there's plenty of
Sure.
data to deal with.
Definitely. And I think just to piggyback in terms of, as you're thinking about AI, and if you're an executive, just like we talk about data and being able to have good data to drive good outcomes, you also have to capture your AI program and understand if the AI program that you've implemented in the company is generating the outcomes you want. And we put together a scorecard, but something that basically shows how are we progressing, and over the years, how's our adoption, how are our programs being delivered? Are we successful with those programs? Are we actually capturing the ROI that we said we would capture, right? That's very, very important. So I would say, as you're thinking through AI and data, data doesn't just apply. You've launched AI and you're done. High five moment. High five moment is when you can sit with your executive team and your board, and you can say, here's how our own AI efficiency is going in the company. It's not about how many agents you've launched. It's how many of those agents are processing. I just looked at an agent the other day that we launched for RevOps, and it's processed in the last 30 days 64,000 tasks, right? Tasks that would have been done by a human. And yeah, maybe we created more tasks because now it's doing more volume across all the people, but that's a very important number. And then going back to your earlier point around tokens, there's a joke going around EBITDA. Now there's a double T in there for tokenization, right? Because tokens are costing real money. And so now you want to take that scorecard and tie it to how much is it actually costing you to run these agents? Did you do the right things? I'm kind of went down the tangent, but I wanted to kind of close the loop on data. Is not just the data that you need to run AI in the company. You got to have your own data to back up that you're actually running a healthy program.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. It takes a ton of sense. And we could go down a whole token path on this as
Yeah.
well, in terms of how to account
Yes.
for tokens, but we need Brian or some other CFO in the conversation there, because it's a topic I'm kind of curious on, but we can skip past it. Blair, where else should we go? I know we had a lot of topics to talk about, so.
I really want to move into risk, because it's, not new, but relative, to, let's say, the internet, fairly new thing coming in. So where I want to start is with AI, is moving too slowly becoming just as risky as moving too quickly?
Yeah, I'll take a stab on that. Yes. Look, I think AI is one of those things that you can't resist, and you have to start to think about maybe guardrails with how you implement it. I think guardrails become an important component. So what can you do? I think there's going to be controlled institutions like banks that are going to be a little bit slower on driving and adopting. But what I've when I speak with my colleagues that do run IT organizations in banks, or their CISOs at banks, they're starting to say we have to do something. because they understand that other banks and other organizations are going to be doing something, and they have to start to kind of create. And you're seeing things pop up, like I have online banking now. I can talk to an agent, and it's still it's giving me some elements of information. So I think the answer is yes. There's definitely a lens of you have to be doing something, and sometimes people don't know what they need to be doing because there's governance, there's compliance, there's all these components. But you have to start dabbling somewhere. And what people need to realize is whenever there's an opportunity to do work faster or better, people will find a way to use AI. They mean, and that creates bigger risk from a security perspective, because that file just got downloaded and now it's running on a different computer. And so I would encourage organizations that are um, obviously they're going to be limited based on their market, but how do you enable it in the best way possible? Because the risk of not doing it can actually be a competitive disadvantage, but also at risk from a compliance, excuse me, from a security perspective, because people are going to try to find a way to make it more efficient. I don't
Yeah,
know, Channing, if you had a thought.
yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think the finance banking industry is a great example of where typically much more risk adverse, rightfully so. I don't want my money getting thrown around, in the wrong hands or whatnot. So, but they still have to innovate, and it's a industry that's frankly, I think, ripe for innovation. And finding that balance is so tricky. And it's really probably
Yeah.
industry by industry. What's your risk tolerance, and within that risk tolerance level, you have to have a risk reward factor that needs to come into play. But I've got a bunch of friends who are in the finance space, working at big financial institutions, and their form of leveraging AI is Microsoft Copilot. Like, that's the extent of it, and it's
Yeah.
pretty limited in comparison to how kind of, Alex, you and I are talking about using AI. But again, there's a risk element there that I think they're trying to be, or their company is trying to be conscientious of. But I do think there's this, and if we stick more in the tech world, there's where obviously we're much more progressive on leveraging AI. There still is a risk balance that I think companies need to be aware of. And it's, how do you use AI? And the risk balance gets into a cost balance, I think, as well, back on the token utilization topic, which I think will become more of an issue in future quarters, let's call it. I think we're kind of just beginning to turn that quarter, as I hear it talked about
Yeah.
more openly, because at first we had this viewpoint, and Brevo, we were very much the same. Let's just use AI. Let's use our LLMs and leverage it for in product, leverage it for how we operate day to day, and then we'll figure out how best to optimize. And we're kind of turning that corner now into optimization, and we're beginning to put thresholds on token utilization across the business, because we do see the risk of overutilization. Our engineers don't have much of a threshold, but certain other people maybe have more thresholds, and or more limited thresholds, I might say. And it's a cost factor. And there is I think, a thought process out there for a while to say, we can replace humans with AI, and let's just do that wherever we can. We don't need BDRs. We don't need marketers. We don't need whatever. Let's have AI do it for us. The reality is AI costs a lot of money also. And so it's not just a pure financial decision. Humans are still very valuable in everything that we do, but we have to find that balance between efficiency, risk tolerance, moving quickly. So it's just an interesting balance. And I think over the past, again, things are moving fast, so we'll measure things in months right now. But over the past several months, I'm definitely seeing us at Brevo, but even more interestingly, our customers kind of begin to come to that realization of, how do I find that balance in how we're operating internally and in terms of products that we buy. Going back to what I was saying before, I see people saying, well, we're not going to build everything ourselves through AI, because number one, it's expensive to build, it's expensive to maintain, we don't have the expertise. So we have to find the balance of using third-party tools that are AI forward. But even those third-party tools are shifting some of how they price to be utilization-based pricing because of the cost of tokens. So again, a lot of factors that I just laid out there, but totally agree with what you said.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think the more risk is not deploying AI. The risk that I would be focused on, or that I am focused on, is data, right? We keep going back to data. By deploying AI, how do I make sure that my data is not exposed, right? And the wrong data is not at the wrong hands of people that are not supposed to see it. So I think guardrails are just very, very important. And that dovetails right into brand. Because if the wrong data is exposed, if the wrong data, public company, whatever it could be, then you have brand reputation. And so if you kind of create, those are the a couple of the guardrails you're trying to protect, and now you're trying to focus on employee productivity, of ease of use and adoption, your program becomes very interesting if you can create those guardrails of data. Now you can start to say, well, yeah, here's, to your earlier point, here's Copilot. At least go have your emails answered faster for you, or help you rewrite those emails. And you can start with those baby steps. But I think those are very, very important components in terms of, is there a risk to the earlier question? Yes, if you don't start implementing, there becomes a risk, because your data, even implementing, makes you think about how to structure your data. So therefore you're going to get into a better place, because now you're raising those questions. It's not just behind the wall.
Yeah. We see that a lot with our customer base. The implementation process is so critical, and we've been able to go a lot faster with implementation, but it's raising new questions as well. And questions that, some of the questions they anticipated, but some of them they didn't anticipate. And as we get into that implementation phase, they're realizing, oh, how should we think about this data? How should we do kind of our data mapping and so on? And again, it's sometimes you haven't implemented a new solution for several years. So now we're doing it, and we're living real time in the benefits and opportunities that I think AI kind of brings forward.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious for both of you, if you find yourselves becoming more risk tolerant or more risk averse as this sort of gets further and further along.
Definitely more risk tolerant from my perspective. I think the risk is, I have a great CISO that Dimitri, that works at Channing. You've met him, that works at Semrush, that partners with the product team, partners with our legal team, with our finance organization, works with the board. We define risk as, if you use risk to define your strategy, there's going to be a lot of things that you're not going to be able to go do. So if you can look at risk, and you can calculate risk, and you can understand which elements you're wanting to take, you could see a lot of innovation. But risk comes with risk. So there's a component of, where are you going to be risk averse is going to be on certain things that are financial data, right? You're going to be much more careful in those components, product IP, those components. But certainly from my perspective, when I look at risk, it's like, well, it can't be the reason why we don't do something. So let's go figure out how to work around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would very much say the same. I think from a business perspective, definitely more risk tolerant. Interestingly, from a personal perspective, I think I'm more risk adverse when I think of like personal investing these days, because it's just so hard to navigate through the world of what's happening out there, and things are moving so quickly. So I'm kind of like shifting my personal investments. I used to be very tech heavy and like leaning into anything cutting edge. Now I'm kind of like boring investments are the easier ones to understand, because things are moving so quickly. But that's just from a financial perspective. I think from a pure work day-to-day perspective, I think you kind of have to be a little bit more risk tolerant to keep up, or else you fall behind. And I see it with some of the competitors that exist out there in our marketplace. Some competitors have not adopted AI, and wow, they're falling quickly. It's pretty amazing.
You should create an agent that does your financial advice for you.
I should. It'd be a lot better than I would, that's for sure.
We have a great question from the audience, and that is, how is success even measured when change is happening in months?
Yeah, I mentioned months, so maybe I'll try to take a stab first. I think so when change is happening in months, that means the outcomes are also happening in weeks now, not months and quarters. So we can get input on those outputs, and we just have to measure. We have to be very clear on the KPIs. I was working with our marketing team on a couple of these topics recently, where we were kind of establishing what are the KPIs of success. And when I look at it through our enterprise sales cycle lens, that's a 90 to 180 day sales cycle, which takes a while to see a closed won deal. But of course, we've got earlier metrics that we can look at earlier in that process that we can look at. So we need to kind of keep an eye on those earlier metrics. And we do have data now that allows us to better understand, click-through rates on emails and response rates on any automations that we're sending, engagement rates on social. We've got much more data visibility, and that data visibility allows us with much more confidence to have early understanding of indicators that we're doing in marketing, or even on the product side. I can have better understanding of indicators on speed of production from a product perspective, and again, various other things like that. So getting granular at the KPI measurement is key, but again, we are fortunate enough to have a strong data infrastructure to allow us to do that.
Yeah, I think you answered the question that exactly how I would answer it. I would just add that, if you have a revenue outcome and you're able to print a product 6 months faster, and you're able to get that product to market successfully, without bugs and all those components, which is what this current world is allowing you to do. Printing out a product faster is going to generate an increased outcome. Getting your employees to be more efficient is going to generate an outcome where you can start to see, your G&A cost, for example, as a percentage of revenue or percentage of expense, start to go down because you're not hiring as fast as you used to, because now you have more bandwidth. Employees are able to do. It's not that they're doing more, it's that they're working faster because AI is helping them to go and get things advanced. So I think Channing is right. You're adjusting your KPIs to basically say, this was a roadmap that I needed. When Adobe and Semrush combined to create a joint product, we're probably looking at an 18-month roadmap, and it was done in 2 months, right? And so the KPIs that we had around that was for people to go and drive and deliver that platform. We've already had closed deals around this product that we brought to market. So it's about adding value to the customer base, and it's about internally going to look at that roadmap of what you're trying to go get an outcome for, and creating your own roadmap, and then hitting those targets, and using AI to help you drive that more modern way of development. That's certainly creating tremendous amount of dividends that we're seeing, and we're pivoting our roadmaps. That back in the day, I used to look at a year. When I joined Semrush, I started looking at 6 months roadmap. What am I doing in the next 6 months? Now I'm looking at 3, because I can deliver so much faster. I'm looking at a 3-month roadmap. This is what I'm doing over the next 3 months, because I know my next 3 months is going to be very different, because I'm going to be able to do a lot more.
Yeah. So interesting on that time, that roadmap time. You're right. It really is condensing, because you can do so much more. So true.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I know we're kind of heading into our last 9 minutes here. What should technology leaders be doing today to prepare for what's next?
Channing, do you want to?
Sure. I should have thought of this one ahead of time. I'm thinking in real time here, because the roadmap we were just talking about, and the speed at which things are moving, and it's becoming so hard to think far into the future. It felt easier years ago to think 2-3 years forward and where things were going. Now looking 6 to 12 months feels like such a far distance. And I think that'll begin to settle over time. I don't think this is a constant, but just because we're in this transition phase right now of technology and AI, we're moving very quickly. So I think to be prepared for the future, you have to be adaptable. That's probably the first thing. And I think adaptability comes with understanding what your options are, understanding how you can pivot and change where you're going as a leader, understanding your data. Back to what we've clearly emphasized as a critical point for both of us is data. So having data that gives you insight, that allows you for that adaptability. And as we think about building product and finding solutions for either our customers, internal or external, we also have to be adaptable. We have to build within a shorter window of time, because we know it's hard to see 6 to 12 months forward. So we have to have that adaptability and flexibility and decision-making processes. So to me, it's very much around adaptability. And then the core to adaptability is insights, which is driven through data.
I would say, look, I think you need to sit down in front of a piece of paper and define what your outcomes need to look like. I'm a program builder. I need to be able to explain the investment that I've made and what it's generating, just from a CIO lens, and what it's enabling for the business. I think Channing landed the points very well, but I would say that, from my perspective, to prepare for what's next is going to essentially say, look, LLM models are becoming more and more powerful. Compute brain power is getting faster. Chips are getting faster, which means you're going to be able to do a lot more automation, and you're going to be doing a lot more workflow efficiency in the organizations that you're looking at. I would find, and what I tell typically at an executive meeting is there's about 50 to 60 processes that run the company. Big processes, complicated. They could have a bunch of sub processes, but big: quote to cash, lead to renew, like a bunch of things, right? Recruit to retire. Look at those respective industries and those processes, and try to understand where you have inefficiency and bottlenecks and loss of productivity, and understand what the vendors in those particular buckets are looking to do to automate. Salesforce said we're going to just give everybody agents, and agents are going to be everywhere, and it hasn't worked, right? Because you have to have data, number one. Number two, you have to really understand the processes that you're trying to solve, things that you're trying to fix. And I would create a plan for that we're going to drive efficiency for employees. We're going to work on adoption. We're going to empower our people. And then the really big scalable components, those are going to be the innovative things. So if I think about my 2027 roadmap with Adobe and with Semrush, it's going to be around the continuous fast deployment of products. What does that mean for my quoting ability for salespeople to sell it, cross-sell, all of those components, how all of that looks like if a salesperson is trying to pitch something new to a customer? How can I provide visibility into what all of the elements that they're trying to drive become efficient and easy to sell? That's what I'm focused on. I know we're running out of time, but that would be my advice for 2026 and 27.
It's a good one. I was just looking, Alan made a comment here, and I think maybe we can address it because I think it's a good one around measuring attribution. Blair, I know we're just about up here, but I wanted to try to address it because I think it's interesting. And I think he was referencing, just prior to us answering this question, we were kind of talking about understanding how we can kind of build solutions, and the measuring of attribution is really tricky these days, because we can look at this through a marketing lens, we can look at this through a solution internally, maybe solution lens, but I'll take a look through that marketing lens first, because it's a topic we're talking a lot about internally at Brevo, is how do we do attribution. And I think the answer to this one is simplicity. I think we can build up highly complex models that could try to calculate attribution and do percentage allocations of attribution. I don't really think that's the right answer to it. And that might be controversial. People might disagree, but I think sometimes simplicity is the better path. So when what we've landed on at Brevo for attribution as very much kind of looking back to a first touch. I'll do it through a marketing lens, as I said, but I think this can apply elsewhere too. What's that first touch attribution back in a certain range of time? So we'll just use 1 year to deal closed. What's the first touch back on that first year until the deal was closed? And that's how we'll do our attribution. And I think we can use that same concept or that same model for how we think about attribution on other projects. What was the source of a project? We could kind of think, where did it start? There's always going to be influence that happens as we think about marketing influence. That's critical. Influence that happens on other projects is also critical. And we should measure that influence. And I think that's a little different than the attribution model. But again, I would keep the attribution simple and then keep an eye on influence and what's influencing deal flow or otherwise throughout. So that's my take.
Alex, any final thoughts?
Okay, I think ultimately AI is the biggest technology adoption implementation that I think any of us have ever seen, and it's really exciting to see what innovation is coming out of it. I think the next even 6 months is going to be very telling in terms of efficiency and what creativity is going to come out of the marketplace. And I think everybody's asking the same questions. People are running around and saying, let's use AI everywhere, or the balance of we can't bring it in. I think we're going to start to see a lot more risk being tolerated in organizations, and I think that's going to drive an increased adoption and a lot of innovation. And I think that the world of my peer CIOs, CISOs, just looking at Mythos, right, the platform that was released that it allows you to see vulnerabilities within seconds, and exploit was shut down by the U.S. government. And I think we're going to start to see a little bit more play in those type of technologies, and maybe some involvement where AI could be too good and too fast in certain cases. So it'll be an interesting thing to watch, and I mean, you can see even some of the controversial things like the wars that are going on, AI is being used all the time. And so it's just a very, very interesting time to be, and I think that we're all fortunate to be part of it. I think if you look at creating interesting programs that are appropriate for your particular space, I don't think you can lose, as long as you understand what the risk is that you're taking. Thank you for having me here. Appreciate it, Channing.
Definitely. Thank you,
it's
Alex. Thank you for joining us. This was fun. Time flew. So catching up.
Super fun. Thank you both. For those watching and for those who indicated that they wanted to watch, just know that the recording will be live immediately after this broadcast stops. Same link, same post. So it'll be right there for you. And we'll be sure to follow up. Channing and Alex, I'll just ask if there are any questions from the audience that we didn't get to. If you don't mind going into the comments and just sharing your thoughts there quickly, that would be great. And with that, thank you guys so much. This has been so fun.
Thanks for hosting.
Appreciate it. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
All right.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.